Hi, everyone. Thanks for logging in this afternoon to the webinar. I am just going to wait a few moments, giving some time for all the participants to arrive here in the space. I'll be right back for the start of the webinar. Welcome. Well, good afternoon to all. I am Stephanie Schwartz-Bailey, the Education Program Manager and Preservation Consultant at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts. I am very pleased to welcome you to the third webinar in our 2020 series of programs offered in partnership with our colleagues in the Florida region, who will in just a moment introduce themselves. The Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts is a nonprofit, full-service facility located in Philadelphia. We have since 1977 been providing preservation and conservation treatment, site assessments, education, and leadership in the cultural heritage sector. As it goes, the year 2020 was to be the debut of CCAHA South, in which the Conservation Center was to expand services to the Florida region in person. But until it is safe to travel again, we are delighted to reach you virtually via webinars, remote consultations, and sharing of resources. Please let me know at any time if you would like some more information regarding working together in collections care. I can be reached at sbailey@ccaha.org. Now, before we turn the program over to our speaker today, Lee Price, Director of Development at the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts, a few introductions will now follow. I'll be back at the very end of the webinar, though, to moderate any questions that you pose into the chat box for Lee's attention. You can start chatting those in during the talk. Lee is going to be keeping an eye in the chat box, but if we can't get to your questions during the webinar, we definitely will address them at the end. And now to Carmen to say hello.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Carmen Godwin. I am the program manager for the Florida Association of Museums Foundation. Just want to thank our partners, the Society of Florida Archivists and the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts, as well as Florida Humanities, Visit Florida, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and Cultural Builds Florida, which is the Florida Department of State Division of Cultural Affairs. Can you go forward one, Stephanie? Thank you. I just wanted to let you know that we will be sending an email to you with the survey attached. The survey will only take 1 or 2 minutes to complete, but it will help us understand what you thought about this program and also what programs you'd like to see in the future. We do develop our programming based on the survey data that we receive. So please just take a couple minutes to fill that out for us. Also wanted to make you aware of upcoming programs that we have on emergency planning and response. We've already had one of these. You can find that webinar recorded on our website at flamuseums.org. But we have 5 more programs in helping you not only develop your plan and update it, but also response to emergencies as well. Visit us on our Facebook and Twitter. FLA Museums is our handle. We also have a private group for you to talk to other people within the field as well. And if you need to reach out to us, you can reach us at FAM or at Carmen, C-A-R-M-E-N, at flamuseums.org. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tyler McLean, the president of the Society of Florida Archivists, and I just want to take a moment to thank our partners with the Conservation Center for Art and Historic Artifacts, the Florida Association of Museums, and the Florida Humanities. It's been a real pleasure working with them to put on this series, and I hope you all are enjoying them as much as I have. If you aren't familiar with the Society of Florida Archivists, we've included links to our website and social media accounts. Please check us out. If you have any interest in joining, we have a link there, and you can also email us. Enjoy this session.
Thank you, Carmen and Tyler. I am now going to stop sharing my screen so that we can call Lee Price to share his screen and commence the PowerPoint. I am watching the chat box in the meanwhile. So if you have any questions, I will try and type in a response during Lee's webinar or immediately at the end. It looks great, Lee, and I will now turn the program over entirely to you. Don't forget to unmute yourself, Lee. We do see your first slide up.
I think I may have solved the problem. Stephanie, we have sound now?
We do. Yay.
We do have sound.
Yes.
Okay, ready to begin. Sorry about the little glitch there.
No worries. But we are looking at your slide from the notes.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
I will get that.
Yes.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to back way up here. Okay. So sorry about the little confusion there. Thanks, Stephanie, Carmen, Tyler. Just to let everyone know what we'll be covering today, I've got 35 slides, which is probably far more than I'll actually show. The next slide, number 2 slide, is, in my opinion, the most important. So as long as we get through that, I think we're in good shape. After that one, though, I'll be covering some medium interest, big picture stuff before hitting the run of slides 10 through 21. And that is the crafting the grant proposal section, which should be helpful. And after that, I've got 13 more slides that there's a good chance I won't get to. They're the largely informational kind of appendix slides. And if I run out of time and don't get to them, we will be sharing the whole PowerPoint with you as a PDF for everyone attending. So you will get easy access to everything, perhaps 2 hours worth of material for your investment of 1 hour here today. If we do have time, I hope to get at least the slide number 24. That's one of my favorites. So at the very end, I'm just going to be judging my time for how much I'll be able to share. So this is slide 2. This is the important one, the one that I originally worked with the Director of Preservation Services at the center to create the first version of this chart back 20 years ago. And I still haven't seen anyone generally using it. It's a flow chart. You read it from the top, flowing down. This slide covers what you're raising funding for when you're fundraising for collections. You see, there's a process to it, and it's a process that all the sophisticated funders, say NEH, IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the sophisticated funders out there understand this process completely, but they rarely state it. It tends to be assumed within the guidelines rather than being explicitly spelled out. So I'm spelling it out here. At the top, 2 things of equal importance. There's inventory. You have to know what you've got and where it is. And second, there's the emergency plan that addresses collections, how to protect your collections. Inventory is essential for everything that follows. The emergency plan, well, you really can address at any point, but if you don't have an emergency plan that addresses the collections, you should. And you should have a copy stored offsite with all the contacts that you might need for any emergency. Under inventory, the next thing, the assessment might be a preservation needs assessment, or it could be a CAP survey. They go by so many different names, but it's the planning document. It's that planning document prepared by a professional outsider that gives you recommendations for how to improve your collections care. Not only is it strategically helpful, but it's a critically important fundraising tool as you move your way down the chart. So under that, we got two things. We have management covering many things, including particularly covering higher level cataloging and processing, and the full set of written collections management policies. And then next to that, there's the environment. You should have good environmental monitoring systems in both your storage and exhibition areas, and be ready to make upgrades if humidity and temperature and light levels, etc., are not optimal for your collections. Go by your preservation needs assessment. It will probably suggest areas for improvement. Okay, your collections are cataloged and you can show that you're making good faith efforts to provide an optimal environment. And at this point, you can take a careful look at the objects themselves. Surveys are collection surveys done by professional conservators, providing condition reports and treatment proposals for items at risk. And these survey documents are also essential fundraising documents for any treatment requests. Digitization is all about accessibility, and it's a great thing, but you should be very careful about digitization of unique fragile artifacts, and also conscious that you still have a responsibility to preserve the original after the digital imaging has taken place. In fact, now you have more responsibilities, both to preserve the item and its new digital surrogate. These days, many digitization projects are done in tandem, either with management, that would be a cataloging or processing project, or with treatment. And combining them in that way means you're handling the artifacts less, and so actually keeping them much safer that way. And the question is, for everyone, where are you currently with your organization on this slide? There are good fundraising sources for all these items except maybe inventory, which is generally considered your most basic responsibility. If you're working your way down the chart, though, what should you be fundraising for next? So stepping back for a minute, here's a look at the big picture. This is roughly how most organizations with special collections begin. In the beginning, somebody recognizes that you have valuable historic fabric. You have structures and/or collections that somebody feels should be saved and shared. Often launched or founded by, frequently it's a visionary who at some point makes it official by seeking nonprofit status with a board of directors and a formal mission statement. The nonprofit assumes responsibility for the historic fabric and delegates tasks. Strategic planning and vision are inextricably connected. You want a map to help in moving toward the consummation of the vision, your dream of what the organization will look like in the future. You move toward the vision by a process of strategic planning. And to realize that vision, you're probably going to need some money. So someone has to do the dirty work of raising it. So in nonprofit jargon, it's called fundraising or development. And although many may be in denial about this, in the thought they'd go into the nonprofit world to avoid doing this work. It's basically a sales job. So my question is here, who are you selling to? Because that's a real difference in which material here is going to be, how you're going to use the material I'm presenting. Depending on your position in your organization, your sales prospects might be, well, if you're the executive director or in the development department, your sales prospects are external, with some of them listed here. But if you're a curator, a collections manager, a librarian, a professional role like that, an archivist, then your first and most important level of sales prospects are probably not external, but internal. You have to sell up the internal ladder. So let's say that you're the special collections manager at an academic library and you have a collection stewardship project that you think the college should raise money for. If you're not top administration at the library, your first challenge is to sell your priority to the key decision makers in the library. And that's just the first hoop. Then somebody has to sell this idea, a let's go for an NEA grant, and let's go for an NEH grant pitch to the university administration and its development department. And that's a even more perilous second hoop. So this whole process, it's a multi-tiered process of internal advocacy, and it is not easy, but it can be done. Navigating the internal landscape requires tact, patience, resilience, stubbornness, and an ability to recognize and pursue opportunities when they arise. For those of you who have to do this type of internal advocacy, and for those of you who don't at this moment, but might have to at your next job, know what you have to accomplish to appropriately care for and to share your special collections. You start with a vision that includes several possible first projects. Going back to that flow chart in the beginning, like things near the top, like a preservation needs assessment, or you need environmental monitoring equipment and training, or an emergency plan that addresses collections. Be considering them as possible first projects, but always remembering that these are just first steps toward realization of a larger vision. Identify the decision makers. Don't just go over your boss's head. Pretty natural. You have to work within the system, realizing that the work of an internal advocate can be touchy. Look for opportunities to share your vision so that others can help you in your advocacy work. Learn what those key decision makers want. And I can tell you that the development department wants lots of money coming in that they can claim credit for, but your projects are probably going to sound small to them, and they won't necessarily want to. Development departments, their interests are not necessarily yours. They might not want to use some of their reliable funders on something small when they're nurturing them for something large, like say a capital campaign or an endowed chair. This is at larger institutions, but it is the way that that development departments think, even in, say, medium-sized organizations, when they may be more partial to doing, say, the education, fundraising for educational. So what you need to do is to find win-win opportunities to attract their attention, opportunities that will bring money in that would otherwise be unavailable. So what is a win-win opportunity? Usually in the area of collection stewardship, it's a narrow grant category that really wouldn't apply to anything else and that doesn't require any matching money. Matching grants are the bane of the development office. They usually don't want to hear about them. They'd much rather hear that you'd like to go for a $10,000 grant that doesn't require a match than a $50,000 grant that requires a one-to-one match, which would put the development department under an obligation to raise more money for you. They don't want to hear that. The $10,000 request, not the $50,000 request, is often the win-win situation. You volunteer to do the work of pulling the grant together, you graciously give them credit for raising the money, and you get your project funded. So here's that big picture from before. You've got an established nonprofit open to the public and you're ready to raise money. And here are your sales prospects, and underneath individuals, some of the type of sales strategies that are commonly used. So as the internal advocate for collection stewardship, here's what you should be looking for. For your strategizing purposes, here are your basic collection stewardship needs from that flowchart. Again, these are your needs. And they're balanced with traditional nonprofit funding sources. And just accept that there are going to be exceptions to everything that I'm about to share. First, individuals. Individuals respond best to things like kids and puppies. They like sentimental and flashy, and they like an ambitious big payoff. They want, to see visible results for money that they're investing. And that's not generally what you've got in your special collections. In most cases, individuals are not a really good funding source for special collections. Same thing, unfortunately, with businesses and corporations. They mainly want high name visibility. The development department would be saving them for the capital campaign when they can name a building after them. Online fundraising, in case anybody noticed, yesterday was Giving Tuesday, so online fundraising is probably on your mind. Online fundraising is really a form of individual sales. So that's that world where kids and puppies rule. Difficult to make the rather complex, sophisticated arguments necessary when you're trying to make this argument for environmental monitoring equipment. I'm not going to put a line through special events because I know enough exceptions to say, well, sometimes, maybe sometimes, small scale special events for high-end donors with you providing privileged behind the scene access, they can sometimes work. Internal sources, internal sources very definitely. DEC's advocating for a dedicated line item in the operating budget. So really that's going to, the budgets that are prepared for approval by the board of directors. If you can get a dedicated line item for special collections or some part of special collections, or increase the size of the operating money going to special collections, a great place to be. Private foundations under that, only if you can find a plausible angle for catching their interest, but definitely look into them. And last, with 3 exclamation points to denote extreme enthusiasm, those very narrowly focused government programs. And this is where opportunities are most likely to arise for funding a needed collection stewardship project. And this is the best place to look for those, the win-win opportunities that I mentioned before. Just a note here about federal grants, because I'm going to be talking about them for a little bit now. If you want to be competitive in the federal grant system, you do have to be registered and you have to maintain your registrations. It's a bit of a pain, but there are long-term benefits that will make it well worth the effort. The 2-step process of registering, first with SAM and then with grants.gov, can take up to 6 weeks. So if there's a federal grant coming up, say NEH Preservation Assistance grants, they're actually due this January 14th, and I recommend them highly. If you haven't registered before, you should be beginning the process of registering right now. You're just around 6 weeks away from that already, and it'll be 2021 soon. Once you're in the system, the hard work is done. Once you're in the system, you can pretty much coast from there. They'll send you annoying reminders to change your password every 8 weeks, but you can do that. And you need to update the SAM registration every year, but they send reminders 2 months in advance. And once again, it's just not that difficult once you're in. If you run into problems, call their toll-free number. I've had to in the past, and my experience is that grants.gov is actually fantastic. Their calls are answered quickly and they stay with you until the problem is resolved. Really good experiences with good people there. And here at last are the key government funders. Not everyone who could possibly fund you, but the main ones. The first 5 being the main federal agencies that offer attractive grant programs. Then I've got CLEAR, which really isn't a government program, but it just seems to fit naturally in here. And it is very attractive. And at the end of today's program, I do have information about these programs, the programs that I value the most at all of these agencies. That's the appendix information that I'm not guaranteeing I'm going to get to here, but it will be sent out to everyone. For the moment, though, I just want to spotlight 2 grant categories. First, IMLS up at the top has an Inspire. That's Inspire with an exclamation point because it's so exciting, it gets an exclamation point. Inspire, grants for small museums. And if you are a small or even a mid-sized museum, it's not too well defined what exactly the sizes are with these, so they leave that up to you to claim it. If you're a small or even a mid-sized museum, historic site, or historical society, this counts as one of those win-win opportunities. They offer up to $50,000 for collection stewardship projects with no match required. So that's the definition of win-win. And you can do a lot with, well, of course you can do a lot with 50,000. And the other one is this one. This is NEH Preservation Assistance Grants, the one I just mentioned with the January 14th deadline, a sterling example of that win-win category where you get up to 10,000, or if they have this new category up to 15,000. Once again, no match required. And the deadline is coming up soon, so there's really no excuse for, well, I think that essentially a month and a half is plenty of time to prepare for this one and to get out a good request with it. Only requirement is that you have to have a collection important to the humanities, but you can be a museum, a library, a historic site, an archive of any size. Over the past 20 years at the Conservation Center, I generally review and or edit around 5 to 10 of these a year, and around half of them are usually funded. And I just have to say a 50% shot at getting funded for a grant in the grant world for a fairly simple request to put together. It's a very reasonable use of your time for the potential money for projects that would otherwise you might not be able to do. If you don't get funded, you get comments from them, you read them, make a few adjustments, and resubmit the following year. And so with this category as our model, we're going to begin now a sort of a deep dive into crafting a successful request. Now, while the preservation assistance grants are fairly typical of a basic federal grant, just realize going in that all federal grants have their own particular quirks and eccentricities. And I'm just hoping that this one is basic enough for you to be able to creatively extrapolate as some guidance for others as well. So here we go. through your close reading of the guidelines. Now, the first thing you do is you close read of the guidelines, making sure that you that your project qualifies, that your organization qualifies for the application. And it's always worth a call to a program officer at the funder to make absolutely sure that that the project you're thinking about is the type of project that they're looking for. Just on this one, with the NEH Preservation Assistance Grants, last year I was working with a organization that was requesting a digitization plan, which is a very, very helpful document. And in the past, I'm just about sure NEH has covered these in the past with their preservation assistance grants. But last year they decided that from now on, you should only go through their NEH Humanities Collections and Reference Resources grant category for digitization planning, for all digitization planning. So so that's not allowed anymore. So it never hurts to make that call in advance to make absolutely sure that you're not wasting your time in putting this application in. Through your close reading of the guidelines, you learn that the narrative is limited to 5 single-spaced pages with a font size no smaller than 11 point. So always choose a very legible font, something conventional and comfortable, not Comic Sans or anything, something like Times Roman or Calibri. Don't use a narrow font like Helvetica Narrow. It looks like you're cheating. The pictured request here is typical, using 12-point Times Roman and skipping spaces to separate paragraphs. After it's all written, if your narrative is stuck at 5.5 pages and you know it can't go over 5, everything you've written is just too precious to cut. Well, then at that point, you can take out the spaces between paragraphs and indent the paragraphs instead, or you can look at going down to 11 point. You've got that. So you write it in 12 point, and then at the end, you make the decisions if you're going down to something a little less legible. For this particular visual example, and I'll be drawing on it again as we go along, I'm using a request from the Antiochian Heritage Museum and Library. It's out near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I did a lot of work on this particular request and was very happy with the end result. And I know it's a good one to work from because NEH also made this request available as one of their model requests on their preservation assistance grant page. So it has the NEH stamp of approval too. For these grants, NEH has 8 questions, A through H. I start by entering all 8 questions in proper order on the document. You never change the order. Don't change the wording either. This holds true for nearly all grants. Number 1 priority is to answer the questions that they've been kind enough to share in the order that they present them. Note that these particular NEH grants, the questions are not of equal importance. They don't receive equal weight in making funding decisions. NEH is all about the humanities and the accessibility of humanities material to academics and authors who are doing credible humanities research. Therefore, questions B and C, here they are. Questions B and C are of tremendous importance. I recommend taking at least 2 pages out of the 5 available to address these questions. And if you need 3 pages to address them, great, go for it. 3 pages is fine. Cut elsewhere, cut back on the other questions. Question A is nearly as important, but doesn't demand as much space. The rest of the questions are of much, much less importance. You just answer them concisely. These grants can fund lots of things: general preservation assessments, disaster preparedness and response plans that address collections, consultations, purchase of storage furniture and/or preservation supplies, environmental monitoring equipment, or preservation-related education and training. Ideally, you're picking one item from the list, and you're also looking at the flow chart to make sure that it's the next natural thing for you to be asking for. If you don't have a general preservation assessment or disaster plan, you start with them. If you do have them, consider the others. You're working your way down the chart. You can mix and match to a limited extent, but the applications always work better if it looks like a coherent single project and not like you're mixing apples and oranges. Question A is frankly a little deceptive. It doesn't ask for the information that I am convinced NEH actually wants to see in this section. They ask for the specific activity or activities that the grant would support and the goals of the proposed projects. This is actually typical of the opening question in many narrative guidelines, and I've spent the past 30 years or so successfully ignoring their directions in this one instance. It's bad journalism form, and what you should give them is classic good journalism form, because good journalism form is based on the way that people actually think, the way that reviewers actually think when they're going over these. So this is my cue for some Shakespeare, a good humanities resource. Opening line, two households, both alike in dignity, and fair Verona, where we lay our scene. So you have the classic. This is the classic journalism, who, what, where. You begin with the classic journalism lead. Your first sentence or two should answer who, what, where, and if it flows, then when, why, and how. Never take it for granted that your grant reviewer has read all the accompanying fill-in-the-blank forms or the abstract. The narrative should stand completely alone as a self-contained unit, because that's usually how reviewers read them. And in those first one or two sentences, I, as a reviewer, want to know, what is the name of your organization? Where in the world are you? Town and state, please. And if it's a medium-sized to small town, I want the region too. I want to be located geographically in the world when I'm reading your request. So that's what and where. When, usually, for the when question, usually these are a one-year project, and you can ask for an extension if it has to be longer in the end. Then the why and the how is the broad name of the project you're proposing, perhaps followed by a succinct one-sentence elaboration. Keep that first paragraph simple and clear. If you want, you can leave it at that, or you can plunge into the why and how in a second, maybe even a third, even a fourth paragraph if you insist. It's a very simple first paragraph, not asked for, but take my word on this, they want it. I generally want question A to take up less than half of the first page. Single paragraph is great if you can do it. 2 or 3 is okay. Never, ever go over 5 paragraphs. Keep it short. Technically, question A is a methodology question. With most requests, this is an extremely important question, but less so here, as these grants provide funding for a laundry list of items that are pretty well defined. Now, with grant requests for large amounts of money, say NEH's Sustaining Cultural Collections or NEH's Humanities Collections and Reference Resources, where you're probably asking for 100,000 minimum, methodology gets its own very important section. And you might respond with 3 or 4 pages explaining it. But this category isn't like that in the preservation assistance grants. You're selecting the project from their laundry list, and you use their language to identify the item you want. General preservation assessments don't need much in the way of a needs statement. If you've never had one before, it's important for you to get your first one. If your current one is more than 10 years old, or if the collection has moved, then that's your need. More detail than that isn't really needed here. Requests for storage furniture, preservation supplies, environmental monitoring equipment, or education and training ideally will emerge directly from the general preservation assessment. In those cases, directly quoting from the assessment is best. If the assessment is a little vague about the specific thing you really want, you don't have a good, strong statement of why you need it, contact the assessor and ask them for a written statement that this item is a priority at this time for your institution. Quoting the assessor, even if it isn't a quote pulled from the assessment, is okay. Question B, one of the two most important questions, you get a better feeling for the question by reading the guidelines closely rather than just the question itself. Because buried in the guidelines is this: the description should then proceed to discuss in detail the content of these materials and their significance to the humanities. Bold that and underline. That's the description should then proceed to discuss in detail the content of these materials and their significance to the humanities. This section is on humanities significance. Or, in other words, when they say, what are the content and size, they're really asking, what is the humanities significance, which should really translate as question B, please share your love of your collections with us. With NEH and with most other federal or state grants as well, your reviewers are going to be your peers, people in the humanities similar to yourselves. They love history. It's their weak spot. So somewhere in your narrative, you have to take the initiative and seduce them with your organization. With preservation assistance grants, this is the seduction opportunity. So section B, this section here should be the heart of your narrative, where you really get to strut your stuff about why your collections are special. And you should always look for that opportunity to show off in any grant request, even when it means stretching the guidelines a little bit, giving them a little more than they've asked for. You need to find a place to make your collection shine, to make it memorable. This is the place in this particular grant category. They even ask for stories. Second bulleted item under section B in their guidelines, not the boring first bullet. It's that second one. Highlight specific examples of important items in the collections. There's your open invitation to share stories about your collection items. Remember that your reviewers are bleary-eyed from looking at a lot of these applications. If you want yours to stand out, you have to tell stories. That's what they'll remember. Tell your best stories. Tell your best story that you'd tell to a tour group. Keep it short and punchy. You can set it off by indenting it or putting it in italics. Telling stories is probably the best way to demonstrate pride in your collection, and that kind of enthusiasm is contagious. You just have to find a way to share it in your narrative. Also, share quotes from humanities professionals. NEH likes them. Humanities professionals, quotes that show respect and enthusiasm for your collection. Always be on the lookout for these quotes. Local college professors are fine for NEH purposes. So are published authors on local subjects. So when they come in to do research, get a contact email so you can approach for a quote down the line. Start establishing that type of relationship because it pays off in the long run. This particular grant isn't currently encouraging letters of support, but when we work on the grants that do accept letters of support, we frequently ask for one or two more than we need and then submit our favorites. But then we frequently use a sentence for one of the other letters right in the text. quotes work great here in question B, and sometimes they're even perfect to lead off the whole request, perched right at the top of your question A response. And then, yes, you do have to give them that dry information that they ask for, the size of collections with each collection and approximate linear feet, and what types of items are in them, unbound manuscripts, books, textiles, etc. Ideally, look to highlight some items that can pique curiosity in a way that suggests stories lurking behind them. Like a diary maybe, or photographs from a protest, or an artist's sketch pad. Don't forget that your reviewer is a humanities lover, a history lover, that your reviewer is probably a lot like yourself. So lay the bait with fun hints about what might be found in your hidden collections. Question C operates in tandem with question B. Some redundancy is fine here, as it's honestly fine throughout the narrative. In question B, you state what you have. In question C, you state how it's been used. Now for NEH, the interests are, in order, most important, number one, academic use of the collections for humanities articles in journals or in books. Second, non-academic use of collections for research and publication in popular books, movies, TV, etc. Three, student use of collections, including student tours. And last, four, other public visitation. With NEH, big numbers don't count for much. Those would be, the big numbers would be the public visitation numbers. Remember that a few good journal publications for this category, a few good journal publications beats 20,000 visitation, at least for NEH purposes. We still have 5 questions to go, but your chances for getting the grant are really about settled once you've completed questions A, B, and C. If you nail A, B, and C, you have a very good chance of being funded. You can pretty much coast through the rest. Question D is easy. Nature and mission. If your organization has a mission statement, you give it in quotes. And the guidelines ask for additional essential information, number of staff and volunteers, number of days per year that you're open. That would be in a normal year, not this year. And your organization's annual operating budget size. Once again, that's really a normal year, not necessarily this one. You can offer more information if you like, but it's not necessary. It may not even be helpful to put in more than they're asking for, and will definitely needlessly take up space. Better used by expanding section B. Question E is my favorite, especially when you get to answer it with one word, because if you're requesting a general preservation assessment because you've never received one, the answer is no. You just, it's the one time you get to give a one-word response, no. Or if you don't feel that's polite enough, you can always do, no, we have never received a general preservation assessment. Now, if you have received one and are basing your request on its recommendations, then as instructed by the guidelines, you give the date of assessment, name of assessor, and any other past reports or consultations that might be relevant. Oh, and if you're asking for a new general preservation assessment to supersede your old one, make the case again for why you need a new one. This would be probably a little redundant with question A, but that's okay. You just, like I think I mentioned before, you don't sweat redundancy. Question F sounds more important than it is. You've really made a clear case for getting the grant, and this is just an opportunity to strengthen it a little, probably with a detail or two that you only hinted at earlier. I like the phrase, quote, natural next step. in approaching this question. You're putting this request into a little historical context. You're showing that you kind of understand that thing, that flow chart, and you're using that to put this request in the context of that flow chart. Write about how you got to the point where you're making this request now. We've inventoried our collections. We've written an emergency plan that addresses them. And now the natural next step is to receive our first general preservation assessment. Then say how you plan on using your new assessment to do the things below it on the flow chart. Improve collections management, upgrade the storage environment, conduct collection surveys if appropriate, and move the organization toward digitization and greater accessibility. For G, mention everyone in the budget with at least one staff member listed, with at least one of your staff members listed as providing direct project management. And for H, just work up a concise timeline together with any consultants involved. You keep it short, and that's it. That's the narrative. Fill out the paperwork. They have some forms that grants.gov you always have to do, but they're fairly simple. You double check the budget and insert everything into grants.gov, leaving some time to handle any last minute emergencies that might arise. And you submit and move on with your life, because it's going to be 6 months before you hear whether you're funded. And by that point, you may have forgotten that you ever even put in the application. That's a short amount of time. 6 months is short for a government grant. Usual gestation period is 9, more, like a pregnancy. You can celebrate when you get it. And if you don't get it, look into resubmitting. Lots of these get funded on the second try. Okay, so I'm at 250 now, and I'm going to move right past the questions because, as I said before, I wanted to reach slide number 24, and then I'll back up and we'll hit questions, and everything else we're leaving for appendices for everybody to that you will get through an email. So this is a dense slide that really links the flow chart with the funders. So for assessments and emergency plans, NEH preservation assistance grants are fantastic. IMLS CAP grants, they're not for the emergency plan. The CAP grants, that's, what is it? Collection assessments. I think it's collection. I don't think it's conservation. Collection assessments for preservation grants. They are not the equivalent of an emergency plan, but they are the equivalent of a general preservation assessment. For collection management, preservation assistance grants, the humanities collections and reference resources are absolutely fantastic for the larger, a lot of cataloging projects that can be mixed nicely. As I said, cataloging projects can be very nicely combined with digitization projects these days. So we've been working with some organizations on that type of combination project. And these are large projects. These are usually $100,000 to $250,000 size projects. And the Humanities Collections and Reference Resources starts out with a $50,000 grant for planning that covers almost everything. There's very little match for that. They just ask for around 10% match, and that can be staff time. So very good for combination combo projects that include cataloging and digitization or treatment and digitization. We've been working on them as well. IMLS Inspire, as I mentioned before, are great, are fantastic grants for those win-win opportunities, and they cover almost all types of collection stewardship projects. And IMLS Museums for America is the exact same thing as Inspire, but it's for organizations that don't fit into that smaller museums category. These are for larger museums. And you also have to you have to do a one-to-one match with the Museums for America. And so it goes on down with environment, the places you can go to for the environmental upgrades. Sustaining cultural heritage collections under NEH is the environment equivalent to the humanity collections and reference resources, those HCRR grants. With you can get small planning grants through the Sustaining Cultural Heritage Collections. By small, I mean 50,000 or under. They're actually pretty big. Or large implementation requests that can be up to $250,000. And with the environment, that can be like a new HVAC system. And just going on down further, the conservation surveys, treatment, digitization. I just want to mention I do have CLEAR listed, and I have them in a slide at the end. The top thing I have on the bullet on CLEAR is hidden collections. They've been funding that for a number of years now. It's an absolutely fantastic program for digitizing hidden collections. And at the moment, they don't know if they have funding to do another year of it. So this could be, it could be that last year was their last year for their hidden collections grants. They do still have a recordings at risk category that they do have, and that's a January 2021 opening. That's for recordings at risk, exactly what it says. And I think this may be the last round for recordings at risk too, before they have to go back to the trough and look for more funding for these categories. CLEAR has not ruled out that they're going to have more hidden collections funding, but they just haven't announced that they have it yet. And another one I'll mention too here fast, Save America's Treasures is one of my favorites. And National Park Service has the money to do another round of Save America's Treasures. And they were supposed to post the guidelines in fall. That's what they had up on their site. And I guess things are just too messy in government right now with everybody working at home to pull it all together, because they still have up that they'll be getting out the guidelines in fall. And it is now, we're now sort of getting into winter. I don't know when they're going to go up, but they have money for another round of Save America's Treasures that will be coming soon. So I'm going to back up here to the questions. And Stephanie, do we have any questions from the chat box?
Hi, Lee. We do have a comment from Elise Lecomte, who notes that one might also want to consider AAM's Museums Collection Stewardship Assessments, also known as Collection Stewardship MAP. Do you have any comment on that?
Yes, yeah, they go naturally into the exact same category with the CAP. Yeah, good surveys to have, yes.
Lee, would it be okay if I type your email directly into the chat box in case folks think of a question that they would like to ask you off the webinar later in the week or later in the month?
Sure.
Okay,
it's here now. And it'll be, and when we send out the PDF with everything on here, all the, well, we have a minute here, so I'll let you know what you'll be getting in the mail. And if anybody does have a chat question, just put it up and Stephanie will share it. After the funders, it's what each slide is. See, this is an appendix. This is some of the programs that are out there for the CAP program, for general preservation assessment, preservation assistance grants. We went over that before. The HCRR, I do enjoy these. These are, I've been doing some good projects with these lately. Inspire, the grants for small museums, I referred to that as one of the win-win categories, where if you go for one of these, you can get up to $50,000, no match required. If any of you here, it can be very frustrating to work at, say, museums or libraries within academic institutions, because everything has to go through the development department. Grants like these are the best in I know of for making friends in the development department, because there are no match required. And because I'm sort of volunteering you to do this, but because you're ready to do the majority of the work instead of the development department, and they'll only submit it. You're really putting the narrative together. Yeah, they'll probably let you go for it. So, so these are a great category. Museums for America, like I said, is the same as Inspire, but it's just for the larger museums. Unfortunately, there's no equivalent in IMLS for libraries or archives. I sincerely wish there was, but you know, everything, it's just the Division of Library Services handles things very different than the Division of Museum Services. NEH Sustaining Cultural Heritage Grant, like I said, if you're looking for major environmental improvements and the planning to get those underway. If you know your organization is planning a large capital campaign, it's good to align these grants with that campaign so you can get a planning grant that can work along with theirs, and you can get into, you know, you can get some money in the capital campaign for your special collection needs for improving the environmental conditions. And Save America's Treasures, I promoted a bit. NEA is for artwork only, but they do museum artwork that's at museums, and it's actually a really good place to go for that type of thing. So I think that's, no, I do. Yeah, and after that, I have clear. And like I said, I have put up right on the top here. They may not be around until 2021, but they still haven't announced they haven't announced that there won't be around in 2021. Stephanie, any questions?
I do have two questions for you. And the first is really interesting. It might be a bit of a chicken and the egg question. Suppose no one has used your collection because no one knows it exists. What might you recommend for fundraising in that case?
Yeah, I have seen, you know, nobody, it's a true hidden collection. A lot, you know, there are a lot of, normally this is when I have my reference interview. My wife's a librarian, and I learned a long time ago about reference interviews, where you have to know more than this behind the question, because I want to know, is this, what is the budget? Do you have full-time professional staff? Because I'm, you know, if it's a museum or a special collection in an academic setting that people just don't know about, but is kind of being cared for, the approaches would be very different than if it was a historical society with an all volunteer staffing, no professional staff. And that in that case, they wouldn't actually be eligible for all that much. Once you get the professional staff, you're eligible for most of these. Yeah, I have worked with places where they've had to sort of say that this will be useful for this and that type of professional. If it's a humanities collection and it truly is not known by anybody, but will have valuable use, I'd be looking at contacting humanities professionals who would be able to use the collection and ask them for statements about how it would be so much more valuable for this collection to be more accessible for people like me. But
gotcha. And along those lines, we have a comment.
Going for. Yeah.
We have a follow-up comment on this topic from Arlene, and she says, I imagine that an unknown collection would need a marketing plan. Are there any grants for that? And would that be able to help in this situation?
None of these grants would cover a marketing plan. They definitely wouldn't cover that with this. It would be covered by IMLS Inspire. And IMLS Inspire would be the best because, you know, I'm making an assumption that if they need a marketing plan because it's an unknown collection, nobody's visiting them, they've got to be a smaller museum at that point. If they're an archive, they're going to be out of luck because IMLS Inspire is only for the museums. But I was only talking about the collection stewardship category under Inspire, but there are two other categories as well. I forget their names, but one is for education, and the other is for your role in the community. And I would think probably you're looking at a marketing plan being written. Probably, you know, you can go up for $50,000 for a marketing plan. So you can go pretty far with that. You can make a much larger project probably with that. But I would be looking at IMLS Inspire for marketing, but not collection stewardship. So collection stewardship is my area. So I don't know quite as much about it, but I can steer you towards that category as a real possibility for some great marketing money probably.
Great. Well, here's one last question, Lee, and it is related to a small niche area for finding funding. And that is, which funding source is best for storage equipment, like fireproof cabinets and supplies?
Under $10,000 preservation assistance grants.
Okay.
Yes, they do furniture. They do, and you know, you can make one request 1 year, and if you get it, buy the furniture and go back the following year. There's no rule for not going back. There used to be a rule that you weren't supposed to go back every year, but I think they dropped that line from the guidelines at some point. So you kind of can. Most organizations that I know actually get these often enough when they're working the system, and they tend to go back once every 2 years. But if you're looking, you know, if you have a good track record on getting these grants, you know how to put together the preservation assistance grants, follow all the guidelines and everything, you can, on the long haul, you can figure like $30,000 for preservation projects and equipment and monitoring, $30,000 every 10 years, which is not bad, you know. I think that's good for anybody. I think it's good for large institutions to take advantage of. So that's January 14th deadline. Please go for your preservation assistance grants.
That's great, Lee. Thank you. And I suppose now working at home is a terrific time to be drafting thoughts and narratives for grant proposals. So thanks for all the inspirational tips and references that we are going to try and get out to folks via email later in the week. You have a lot of thank yous in the chat box. And from me too, thanks very much for sharing an hour of your afternoon today. And with that, I think I will say goodbye.